Imagine waking up, not in your bed, not on a comfortable couch, but encased in cold, hard metal. You blink, disorientation clinging to you like a shroud, above, below, to every side. Identical surfaces scored with faint lines converging into patterns that offer no comfort, no familiarity. The air hums with a low, resonant thrum, a mechanical heartbeat in the belly of some unseen beast. A single, harsh light glares down from the ceiling panel, illuminating the cube you find yourself trapped within. It's a room, roughly 14 feet square, eerily symmetrical. And on each of the 6 faces, the floor, the ceiling, the 4 walls, there is a door. A heavy, circular hatch, sealed tight. Where are you? How did you get here? These questions echo in the sudden, terrifying silence of your own mind, only to be swallowed by the oppressive geometry surrounding you. This isn't just a room. It's a cell, a puzzle box, a tomb in waiting. Welcome to the Cube. Our story begins not with answers, but with the abrupt immersion into this nightmare. We meet Alderson first, a man disoriented, panicked, stumbling through one hatch only to find an identical room waiting. Red light bathes this new chamber. He moves again, seeking any variation, any sign of escape, but finds only relentless uniformity. And then, in a room bathed in sterile white light, he steps forward, and the illusion of safety shatters. A net, impossibly fast, whips out from the wall, vaporizing him into bloody fragments before he can even scream. The cube has claimed its first victim, establishing its lethal nature without preamble, without explanation. Alderson is gone, a grim warning etched onto the walls in his own remains. Elsewhere, others awaken to the same bewildering reality. Quentin McNeil, a police officer, tough, authoritative, immediately tries to impose order on the chaos. His instincts scream, "Prison," but this place defies conventional logic. Joan Holloway, a free clinic doctor, pragmatic and resourceful, though her medical skills seem tragically irrelevant here. David Worth, quiet, withdrawn, almost defeated from the outset, an architect whose contribution to this nightmare remains, for now, buried beneath layers of resignation. Wren, nicknamed the Wren, a seasoned escape artist, cynical yet possessing practical knowledge of prison breaks, quickly becomes the group's initial beacon of hope. And Levin, a young mathematics student, bright but overwhelmed, her mind accustomed to theoretical problems, now faced with a terrifyingly real one. Finally, there's Kazan, an autistic man, largely nonverbal, seemingly detached, his presence initially perceived as a liability by the more pragmatic members of the burgeoning group. They find each other randomly, drawn together by the shared absurdity of their confinement. Doors open, revealing not escape, but another person grappling with the same crushing bewilderment. Initial interactions are fraught with suspicion, fear, and the desperate need for answers none of them possess. Quentin naturally assumes a leadership role, barking questions, demanding information, his police training kicking in, searching for motive, for perpetrators. Holloway tries to establish a baseline of calm, checking for injuries, assessing their immediate needs. Wren, the escape veteran, offers the first glint of practical strategy. He's seen complex security systems before. He understands traps. Wren proposes a method to test the rooms before entering. He takes off a boot and tosses it into the next chamber. Nothing happens. He declares it safe, a baseline room. He explains his theory. Some rooms are trapped, some are not. They need a system. His confidence is infectious, a small spark in the overwhelming darkness. He demonstrates again, tossing a boot into an adjacent room. It lands harmlessly. But Wren knows simple motion detection might not be the only trigger. He explains that some traps might be tripped by sound, heat, or other stimuli. His expertise seems invaluable. He volunteers to go first into the next room, checking it thoroughly. The others watch, holding their breath. He steps inside, scans the walls, the floor, the ceiling. He nods. Safe. But the cube is designed to lull its inhabitants into a false sense of security. As Wren moves confidently into the next room, another doorway hisses open. He turns, perhaps relieved to see another potential survivor, or maybe alerted by the sound.
It doesn't matter. Before he can react, a spray of acid erupts from the wall, catching him full in the face. His screams are horrifyingly brief, dissolving along with his features. The group recoils in terror, the stench burning their nostrils, the brutal reality crashing down upon them. Ren, their guide, their supposed expert, is dead. The cube is not just a puzzle. It's a predator, patient and utterly merciless. Hope evaporates, replaced by primal fear. They are truly alone, trapped with an invisible, indiscriminate killer. The loss of Ren forces a grim shift. Quentin's suspicion intensifies. He interrogates Worth, Holloway, Levin, searching for connections, for anyone who might know why they are here. Who built this place? Terrorists? The government? Aliens? Theories fly, fueled by paranoia and the lack of any concrete information. Holloway tries to maintain a semblance of reason, suggesting they stick together, work methodically. Worth remains withdrawn, muttering about the pointlessness of it all. Levin, initially quiet, begins to notice something Ren missed, or perhaps didn't have time to consider. On the threshold between rooms, etched into the metal conduits connecting them, are numbers, small, precise engravings. 3 sets of 3-digit numbers. Levin, her mathematical mind finally finding purchase, becomes obsessed with these numbers. Are they serial numbers? Coordinates? A code? She starts recording them meticulously, her notebook filling with columns of digits as they cautiously navigate from room to room, using the boot-tossing method, now weighted with the memory of Ren's horrific end. The sheer scale of the structure begins to dawn on them. Every room seems identical, yet the numbers change. They pass through rooms bathed in eerie blue, stark white, ominous red, sickly green. The colours seem arbitrary, perhaps indicating something, perhaps just another layer of psychological torment. Quentin grows increasingly impatient with Levin's calculations and the cautious pace. His authoritative demeanour cracks, revealing a volatile temper simmering beneath. He clashes with Holloway, who advocates for careful testing and distrusts Quentin's aggressive approach. She sees his desperation bordering on dangerous. Worth, meanwhile, offers little contribution beyond cryptic pronouncements of futility. He seems almost resigned to dying here. Kazan remains a puzzle, occasionally echoing sounds or numbers, his presence largely ignored or treated as a hindrance, especially by Quentin, who sees him as dead weight slowing them down.
Levin's focus is absolute. She theorizes the numbers might represent Cartesian coordinates, mapping their position within a larger structure. If they can figure out the numbering system, they might be able to determine the dimensions of the cube, find the edge, and potentially locate an exit. Her hypothesis hinges on identifying patterns. She searches for sequences, relationships, anything that breaks the apparent randomness. The tension ratchets up with every room they check. A wrong move, a miscalculation, means death. They encounter another trap. Flame jets erupting from the floor, narrowly avoided thanks to a timely boot toss. The constant threat frays their nerves thin. A breakthrough arrives unexpectedly. Levin notices that in the trapped rooms, at least one of the 3 numbers etched on the threshold is a prime number. A prime number, divisible only by 1 and itself. It's a complex check, requiring calculation for each 3-digit number, but it seems consistent. Rooms without prime numbers in their sequence appear safe. Rooms with primes are lethal. This discovery is monumental. It provides a predictive tool, a way to navigate the labyrinth with a degree of certainty, albeit one requiring constant vigilance and calculation. For the first time since Ren's death, there's a tangible sense of progress, a shield, however thin, against the cube's lethality. Their cautious journey continues, guided by Levin's prime number checks. They move with renewed purpose, though the atmosphere remains thick with fear and suspicion. Quentin, though relying on Levin's math, still chafes under the slow pace and the lack of definitive answers about their captors or purpose. He pushes the group harder, his interactions becoming increasingly abrasive, particularly towards Worth, whose quiet nihilism infuriates him. Holloway acts as a buffer, trying to mediate, reminding Quentin that Levin needs time and focus to perform the crucial calculations. The sheer monotony of the identical rooms, punctuated by the nerve-shredding tension of checking for primes, begins to take its toll. They are hungry, thirsty, sleep-deprived. The constant hum, the shifting-coloured lights, the claustrophobia. It's sensory deprivation and overload rolled into one, designed, it seems, to break them mentally as much as physically. During a moment of rest, the conversation turns again to the why. Why them? Are they criminals? Test subjects? Is this some elaborate psychological experiment? Holloway clings to the idea of a powerful, unaccountable entity, perhaps governmental or corporate, operating outside the law. Quentin leans towards a more punitive explanation, believing they must have done something to deserve this. It's Worth, the silent architect, who finally cracks. Under duress, perhaps seeing the futility of silence in the face of Levin's progress and Quentin's mounting pressure, he confesses. He didn't design the inside of the cube, the traps, the mechanisms. But he was hired, anonymously, to design the outer shell. A featureless cube, commissioned with specifications that, at the time, seemed abstract, bureaucratic. He didn't know its purpose. He didn't ask. He just did his job, collected his pay, and tried to forget the unsettling emptiness of the project. The revelation is stunning. Worth, the man who seemed most detached, is intrinsically linked to their prison. Quentin explodes in fury, accusing Worth of being complicit, of knowing more than he let on. Holloway is horrified, grappling with the casual bureaucratic evil that could enable such a structure to exist. Worth defends himself weakly. He was just a draftsman, a small cog in a vast, indifferent machine. He argues the cube might even be purposeless, a government project forgotten, running on autopilot, its original function lost to time and apathy. He suggests their presence might be entirely random, individuals grabbed simply to fill the vacancies. This idea, the sheer pointlessness of their suffering, is perhaps the most terrifying prospect of all. Worth's confession irrevocably alters the group dynamic. He is now an outcast, viewed with suspicion and contempt, especially by Quentin. Yet his knowledge, however limited, is also crucial. He confirms the vast scale Levin suspected. He reveals the dimensions based on the coordinates she's been plotting. 26 rooms by 26 rooms by 26 rooms. A staggering 17,576 identical chambers. The number is almost incomprehensible, emphasizing the immensity of their prison and the dwindling odds of finding a specific exit point, if one even exists. Armed with the dimensions and the prime number trap detection system, Levin refines her calculations. She realizes the numbers aren't just coordinates, they relate to the room's movement. This isn't a static structure. The rooms shift, rearrange themselves periodically, like a colossal Rubik's Cube. This explains why backtracking is futile, why previous paths might now lead to traps. The complexity deepens, but so does Levin's understanding. She believes she can map the permutation cycles, predict the movements, and identify a room that will eventually align with the outer shell, the bridge room, the potential exit. Their journey becomes a race against time, against the shifting structure, and against their own deteriorating psyches. Quentin's paranoia escalates. He starts seeing patterns where none exist, suspecting betrayal at every turn. His aggression becomes less controlled, his threats more explicit. He clings to his perceived authority, the last vestige of his identity from the outside world. But in the cube, it twists into tyranny. Holloway increasingly challenges him, defending Worth, shielding Kazan, trying to maintain moral clarity in the face of encroaching madness. The friction between them is palpable, a dangerous counterpoint to the external threats. Kazan, largely silent until now, begins to exhibit strange behaviors. He mimics sounds perfectly, repeats number sequences uttered by Levin, rocks back and forth. Quentin views him as an intolerable burden, suggesting they leave him behind. Holloway vehemently refuses, her compassion clashing sharply with Quentin's brutal pragmatism. She sees Kazan not as a liability, but as a person deserving protection, a symbol of the humanity they must retain to survive. Worth, ironically, finds a strange kinship with Kazan's apparent detachment, seeing a reflection of his own feeling of being lost in an indifferent system. Levin's calculations lead them towards what they believe is the edge of the massive structure. The journey is arduous. They are weak, dehydrated, haunted by the memory of Wren, and the ever-present possibility of a miscalculation, a missed prime number. They reach a room where one wall opens not onto another identical chamber, but onto a vast, dark chasm. Below them lies the outer shell Worth described, separated by a terrifying drop. Across the void, perhaps 50 feet away, is another doorway, presumably the exit or the bridge room leading to it. The air here is different, colder, carrying the scent of the outside world, a tantalizing promise of freedom. But the gap is too wide to jump. They need a rope. Resourcefully, they begin stripping off their outer layers of clothing, tearing them into strips, tying them together knot by knot. It's a desperate measure, their makeshift rope flimsy, their knots tied with trembling, exhausted hands. Quentin takes charge of the anchoring, testing the strength. Holloway volunteers to go first, the lightest among them besides Kazan. She argues her medical skills might be needed on the other side. Quentin agrees, perhaps too readily. Holloway begins her perilous traverse, hand over hand, dangling precariously over the abyss. The others watch in breathless silence. She makes it halfway across, her arms straining. Suddenly, Quentin, positioned near the anchor point, shifts his weight, claims to be slipping. The rope jolts violently. Holloway cries out, losing her grip. For a heart-stopping moment, she dangles by one hand, pleading for help. Quentin hesitates, a dark flicker in his eyes. Then, deliberately, shockingly, he lets the rope slacken further. Holloway stares back at him, a look of betrayal and horror dawning on her face, before she plunges into the darkness below. Silence. Utter, horrified silence. Levin and Worth stare at Quentin, the implication hanging heavy in the air. Did he slip, or did he let her fall? Quentin recovers quickly, blaming the poor rope, the precarious situation. But his explanation rings hollow. He saw Holloway as a challenge to his authority, an impediment. Her idealism, her defense of Worth and Kazan, grated on his increasingly fractured worldview. In his mind, perhaps, he was merely eliminating a weakness. Worth understands immediately. He sees the murder in Quentin's eyes. Levin is too stunned, too terrified to process it fully, but the seed of doubt is sown. The group is broken, not just by the cube, but by the darkness within one of their own. The remaining four, Quentin, Levin, Worth, and Kazan, are now bound by a terrible secret and deepening mistrust. Quentin asserts control more forcefully, his actions tinged with menace. Levin retreats further into her calculations, seeking refuge in the cold logic of numbers, perhaps trying to ignore the human horror unfolding around her. Worth becomes even more fatalistic, convinced that escape is impossible, that Quentin will likely kill them all before they find it. Kazan remains inscrutable, humming softly, seemingly unaware of the deadly shift in dynamics. They continue their search for the bridge room, guided by Levin's ever more complex calculations involving permutations and room movements. They pass through more rooms, the threat of traps now secondary to the threat posed by Quentin. Levin realizes there's a flaw in her prime number theory. Some rooms predicted as safe should have been trapped based on later calculations of the room's full cycle. She hits a wall. The calculations become overwhelmingly complex, factoring in the constant shifting, the immense number of possible positions. The coordinates alone aren't enough. The prime numbers were only part of the puzzle. There's another layer she can't decipher. As Levin wrestles with factorials and permutations far beyond her immediate grasp, frustrated and near despair, something extraordinary happens. Kazan, who has been quietly observing Levin's work, suddenly speaks, clearly and coherently. He begins reciting vast numbers, identifying complex mathematical properties, factorials, prime factors, with staggering speed and accuracy. He looks at Levin's notes and effortlessly performs calculations that were baffling her. It dawns on them. Kazan is an autistic savant, possessing prodigious mathematical abilities. His perceived disability, the thing that made Quentin deem him worthless, is actually the key. He can process the enormous numerical complexity of the cube's shifting patterns in ways Levin, for all her intelligence, cannot. This revelation galvanizes Levin and Worth. Working together, Levin guiding Kazan, providing the framework, Kazan supplying the raw computational power, they finally crack the code. They determine the precise coordinates and movement cycle of the bridge room, the one room that periodically docks with the outer shell, providing a pathway out. They know where they need to be, and when. Hope, fragile but real, flickers anew. But Quentin sees this development not as salvation, but as a threat. Levin and Worth no longer need him. Kazan, the retard he despised, is now invaluable. He knows Worth suspects him over Holloway's death. He realizes his control is slipping. His paranoia twists into murderous rage. As they navigate towards the designated bridge room coordinates, Quentin's mask of civility crumbles completely. He becomes openly hostile, threatening, his descent into savagery mirroring the brutal environment. He argues that only one or two need to escape, implying he intends to be among them, eliminating perceived rivals. They reach the target coordinates. According to Kazan's calculations, this room will soon align with the exit. But before it does, Quentin makes his move. He lunges, intent on silencing Worth, perhaps Levin too, ensuring only he and maybe Kazan, as the key, make it out. Worth, in a final act of defiance against the futility he so often espoused, intercepts Quentin, tackling him, buying time for Levin and Kazan. A brutal struggle ensues in the cramped confines of the cube. Worth fights with the desperation of a man who has accepted his fate but wants others to survive. Levin, terrified but spurred by Worth's sacrifice, opens the door to the adjacent room, the bridge room, now glowing with an ethereal, piercing white light that streams in from the outside. She pulls Kazan towards it. Worth manages to wound Quentin, slowing him down, but is grievously injured himself in the process. He yells at Levin to go, to take Kazan and run. As Levin drags the disoriented Kazan through the hatch, Worth slams the door shut, trapping himself inside with the enraged Quentin. Sounds of a final, fatal struggle echo from behind the sealed hatch. Levin finds herself with Kazan in the bridge room. It's moving, sliding towards the opening in the outer shell. The blinding light beckons. Freedom is inches away. But then, the hatch behind them bursts open. Quentin, bloodied but relentless, emerges, driven by pure, animalistic fury. He grabs Levin's leg, pulling her back from the threshold of escape. Kazan stands frozen, overwhelmed by the light and the violence. Levin, summoning her last reserves of strength and ingenuity, remembers the conduits connecting the rooms, the thresholds with the numbers. She realizes the gap between the moving bridge room and the stationary portal room they just exited is widening. Using a piece of metal debris from the struggle, she jams the mechanism of the hatch Quentin is clinging to. As the bridge room continues its movement towards the outer shell, the portal room begins its own programmed shift in the opposite direction. The gap widens rapidly. Quentin finds himself caught between the two moving rooms, the threshold conduit becoming a rack, stretching him, crushing him. His screams are swallowed by the grinding mechanics of the cube as his body is torn apart in the shearing space between worlds. Levin collapses, exhausted, watching Quentin's gruesome end. She has survived. She turns to Kazan, who is still standing at the edge of the moving bridge, bathed in the intense white light emanating from the exit. He seems strangely calm, almost serene. He takes a tentative step forward, then another, walking into the light. He doesn't look back. He simply walks out of the cube, into the unknown brilliance beyond. Levin tries to follow, pulling herself towards the light, towards the freedom Kazan has just embraced. But the bridge room has reached the end of its docking cycle. It begins to retract, pulling away from the outer shell, sliding back into the dark heart of the massive structure. The light shrinks, the portal closes. Levin is left stranded, caught between the empty doorway where Kazan disappeared and the endlessly repeating mechanical labyrinth behind her. Her fate remains unknown. Did she find another way? Did the cube eventually claim her too? Or is she destined to wander its shifting corridors forever, another ghost in the machine? We are left, like Levin, staring into ambiguity. Kazan escapes, but into what? Freedom? Another level of the experiment? We never see. His savant nature, which made him seem broken in the ordinary world, was perfectly adapted to the bizarre logic of the cube, perhaps suggesting a critique of how society defines normalcy and disability. Worth finds a measure of redemption in sacrifice, defying his own nihilism. Holloway's idealism is crushed by human brutality. Quentin becomes a monster, consumed by the fear and paranoia the cube cultivates. Levin, the intelligent survivor, uses logic and reason to navigate the physical threats, only to be potentially trapped by the cube's inexorable mechanics at the very end. What was the cube? Who built it? Why these specific people? The film offers no definitive answers, and perhaps that is the point. Worth's theory of bureaucratic oversight, of a monstrous project continuing pointlessly long after its original purpose was forgotten, feels chillingly plausible. A testament to mindless industrial creation where the why is less important than the how. Or maybe it was a psychological experiment designed to strip away civilization and observe human nature under extreme duress. The capacity for cooperation, calculation, compassion, and ultimately, violence. The cube stands as a monument to existential dread. A prison where the architecture itself is the enemy, where escape relies on understanding arcane rules that seem deliberately designed to obfuscate. It's a metaphor for incomprehensible systems, for feeling trapped within social or political structures that operate with an inscrutable and often lethal logic. It explores the human condition under pressure, the quick descent into tribalism and violence, the struggle to maintain reason and empathy, the unexpected sources of strength, and the terrifying possibility that, in the grand scheme of things, there might be no grand scheme at all. Just shifting walls, deadly traps, and the echo of unanswered questions in an endless mechanical void. We are left haunted by the humming silence, the shifting colours, and the chilling realization that sometimes the most terrifying prisons are the ones we don't understand, built by hands we'll never see, for reasons we may never know.